All right, welcome everybody for the fourth episode of the Reason and Revelation podcast with my brother Ammon and I. Today we will be talking about the Nuremberg trials. If you are not familiar with them, they're very fascinating. The trials are about what the Allies did to try the remaining Nazi leaders after World War II for the war crimes that they had committed. And one fascinating thing about them is a psychiatrist evaluated the mental fitness of all of the leaders and actually determined they were above average intelligence. They were not crazy. They actually were not that different from even ordinary Americans. And so, what was it? What was it that made them capable of mass murder? That's what we will cover today, and we will apply it to your life as well, because the answer reveals some issues in our culture and maybe even in your own life. And another interesting thing you will learn is that the shrink that interviewed all of these Nazi leaders ended up killing himself. And we'll talk about why that happened as well. So these Nazi leaders, they weren't crazy. And that is the terrifying part. So Dr. Kelly interviewed Goring, who, if you've seen the recent movie with Russell Crowe, it's very good. It's very worth watching. But he plays Goring, who is the basically top in command Nazi who is still alive. And after the shrink spent a lot of time with Goring, he found him to be actually fairly charismatic, even charming in various ways, and honestly pretty brilliant. All things that we are kind of disturbed to think about with somebody as guilty as this guy. And obviously the implication here is that ordinary, educated, even likable people can do way worse things than we want to believe. In the movie, it even shows Goring outwitting the American lawyer in the Allied tribunal. The lawyer brought the best that he had, and Goring kind of, broke down the arguments brought against him and kind of won the little moment in court, kind of confounded the lawyer. And it's like, how could that happen when one of the most obviously evil things that have ever happened in the last 150 years he was
Yeah.
guilty of.
And it gets even worse. Beyond even like the Hollywood drama that they try to bring into the movie, I ended up looking into it a bit more. And Hermann Goring, he actually helped some of the other defendants with their cases because the lawyers that the Allied powers to try and have their fair tribunal gave each of the defendants their own little lawyer. And Goring actually helped them and told them ways they could get around by making the Allied powers look stupid. And he actually got one of the defendants acquitted by because a little more context before that. The Allied powers actually ended up not bringing any witnesses to the Nuremberg trial. They just
Weird.
didn't want to. Yeah, very weird. No witnesses. I'm like, what court case is any good without any witnesses? Because they thought they had enough evidence to put all of these guys away by one of the Germans' biggest flaws that they wrote all of their atrocities down. They were very book smart and they kept up to date all of their journals with everything that they thought was a good idea, their plans, what they thought about these plans. They even had some of the defendants. I forget which one it was. You could look it up, but he tried to claim that Hitler had done some sort of psychomancy on him to change his mind from what he wrote down on the paper to try and get away from these charges. But
Mm.
Goring knowing that they only had these journals. One of the charges against this other German defendant was that they had sunk a submarine and then killed the people in the water instead of helping them up, which was a crime against humanity. But he told them to bring up that the British had done the same thing to other Axis powered people on boats, and they'd killed people in the water, and that got that person acquitted. So Goring here, very smart man, and even weirder too about him. When they arrested him, they found 40,000 pills in his car.
Oh yeah,
So
he
he
was
was like
addicted,
hopped
right?
up with big time addicted. That's like an understatement. So this guy hopped up out of his brain, probably on withdrawals, outwitted these lawyers and helped to acquit some of the most evil. Like, could you imagine a more lopsided case in American history arguing that Hermann Goring, one of the second in commands to Hitler, is evil and has killed many, many people and deserves to die? And it was a hard case. I mean, look it up. It's pretty amazing that he was able to do this. And it's because he was a genuinely charming guy, like you're saying.
And that brings up a good point. Like just because somebody looks good in a political debate, or look good on TV, maybe on CNN or something, like that doesn't mean that they're not a horrible person. You got to look a little bit deeper. And I think that also is a big problem with socialism, like technocracies as well. You hear of more lately, where we have very advanced elite experts as the head of society, and they'll make better decisions. And we should just give a lot of power to these very smart people, and they'll take care of things. And Goring is a perfect example of why that's a problem, because just because these experts are smart doesn't mean that they actually care about you or society. And in fact, like you're saying here, they are smart enough to use logic to hide their sins and even make them look okay.
Right, cover their deceit. They become very adept at it. And it reminds me of one of Hitler's more famous quotes where he said, "Give me the textbooks and I can control the state." What does he mean by control the state? He can literally change how people think, what people think is rational. He can start to paint this one class of people as not really human. And Goring, he fell for it. And it's not hard to see that if you don't have something you base your life off of, that's an anchor, you're just as adrift as he was.
That is a perfect transition into kind of what we believe was the whole missing piece that allowed these men to do these horrible things when they're otherwise ordinary and well educated, maybe even like culturally sophisticated, like they like to go down to the theater, and they even love their daughter, and they had a pretty healthy personal life. Like how did they do this? And what we argue is that what was missing is a functioning moral conscience, not an absence of knowing of what is right and wrong. They weren't stupid. They weren't mad. They knew exactly what was happening. They simply no longer had an internal mechanism that required them to care. I guess the most dangerous perpetrators of evil, therefore, aren't necessarily monsters. They're just ordinary people who stop thinking morally and simply follow the culture or system. And I think that relates to today as well. Because we can look at these Nazi leaders and be like, okay, yeah, they lost their morals. We're never gonna like lose our morals as bad as they did. We tend to look in retrospect and we're like, how could these guys live during the Holocaust and do nothing about it? Or how could the colonists live during slavery and do nothing about it? You know,
Hmm.
but I would pose the same question that you've probably heard, Ammon. Like, how do we allow the sweatshops and child labor harvesting, the lithium for our electric car batteries or
Or even
for our
abortions. I mean,
iPhones?
right?
Yeah. Yeah, abortions for sure. Kids violently killed in the womb, or organ harvesting of live patients in China. Like that's happening to millions of people right now, Uyghurs and other religious minorities in China. Our
Hmm.
culture just normalizes or ignores these things while claiming awareness and self-righteousness on other issues. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
something that I think is with that. Sorry, Chris. I just wanted to
no,
say this
you're good.
too. There was a case this just a little while ago of this guy who broke into this home with a family in there, and he killed this guy's daughter and son. I think he raped the daughter, and he tried to attack his wife before he was able to subdue him. Got him to the police, and when he was tried, they ended up letting him go for a plea of insanity.
I hate it when they do
Just
that.
out on the streets again. And like when I first heard that, the thing that comes to my mind is like, isn't every person who commits a murder or something evil like this not in their right mind? Couldn't you say any one of these people is insane? Like I've never got that. And I think that goes just as much for this. Any of these Nazis in the Nuremberg trial could have claimed the plea of insanity. I was caught up in the moment, doing all of the Third Reich stuff. And, it was just, you had to be there. And yeah, I was totally insane. And that's what I plead. And I don't think the answer is to let him off the hook like they did with this guy, family murderer. But you can't have people like this in society. If they're so far gone that they would do something this evil, I, they have to be put away. But I guess I would ask you the same question, and I think you're probably going to go along with it. Is like, what do you do when that's all of society has been pushed into thinking this is okay?
Yeah, I mean, when it's that bad, you have to get to reframing society before it kills itself, tears itself apart, or at the
Hmm.
very least kills its minorities. It's also interesting to consider that some of these men could be like not really as evil as we would normally think, and be like, well, how did they actually get to that point? And so looking into the Shrink's book, Kelly's book, we actually find some answers that he comes up with that I think relate to our culture as well. So, for example, one way that they can get to that point, one of the leaders that was at Nuremberg, was over like the Nazi youth or whatever,
Hmm.
and so he was the guy shaping children's values in Germany for a whole generation. And yet, obviously, this guy had no moral framework himself. And so, what do you expect for these youth? They're going to go on to vote for somebody like Hitler when they've been
Yeah.
indoctrinated by people who don't have morals. And like, obviously, how does that uh, relate to America? Do the Hollywood elites and those that are making the media for our kids today, do they have impressive morals? Do they have morals at all? And even our school teachers, like what are their morals now that we've kind of separated church and state, and we don't go by the Bible, and we're not going to church as much anymore? Um, are we going to be that surprised if our kids start trending to not having morals themselves?
It's almost to the point, like if you're not going to school in like Texas, because Texas public schools, they still have you like say the pledge, and they actually have you do a state pledge to Texas, and they allow prayers in their schools sometimes. But in some of these
Sweet.
schools, like me and Chris, we grew up in Michigan, and I remember seeing some like screwed up things where I'd actually heard a teacher say that it's not the content of your character, but the privilege you were born with that matters. And I'm like, what kind
Jeez.
of moral is that? Like, what are you teaching these kids? And then you're surprised that you have a bunch of entitled transgender freaks that are roaming society that have no idea how to even function in life. That's the answer for how Rome fell. Nothing could take it down from the outside. It had to crumble from within.
Yeah, and each person and their morals is one little building block of society. The next idea for how these Nazi leaders could get so bad while seeming ordinary otherwise is compartmentalization. So all of the leaders had a really good capacity to separate their professional life from their personal identity. Like I said, Goring loved his daughter. So, for example, if one of the Nazi leaders' jobs was to file paperwork for deportations, he just does his job, and what happens at the end of the railroad, that's not his department. And so when everybody participates, nobody feels solely responsible. And I think that structure in the Third Reich wasn't accidental. It was designed so that no individual felt sole ownership of any atrocity. So, and then that ties into another problem is the danger of the good German mentality, where you can have citizens who disagree, like privately with the Third Reich, but they publicly conform. So they don't like personally commit any atrocities, but they enable those who do through silence, professional service, or social normalization of those acts. And I think this public conformist but private dissenter is maybe the most common type of German that allowed the Nazis to get as far as they did. Very socially acceptable, and probably the most dangerous type of German, because they provide the legitimizing mass. Without that, the extreme leadership could never function. And obviously that relates to America too. How often do we say, like, I personally don't agree with this thing that my company is doing, or that maybe that the school is insisting on, or the government during the Biden administration. But like, I'll just go along with it because I'm going to be singled out if I do anything. But I'm still a good person because I don't really like actually believe that thing, but I'm gonna conform to get good grades or to get along in my career or whatever.
Yeah. Is that like the whole silence is violence kind of argument?
Yeah, I guess there is a good side to that then.
I guess that's what you get when this is really the only part of human history, I think, where you could try and claim that as a real phenomenon. That they try to portray that as like we're in Nazi America right now, and that the blacks and women are going through these terrible atrocities. And you've heard white silence equals violence.
Yeah.
But that literally was it right here, because that was what almost all of them tried to claim in the Nuremberg trials, right? That it wasn't them, it was all Hitler, and they just were in charge of the clerks, and I was in charge of the railroads, and I was in charge of teaching kids.
Yeah, they passed the buck very well. And even if they were involved with one part of it, they weren't involved with the majority of it. Or like you said, a lot of them were like, I was just taking orders. There's so many things they can do to pass the buck. So I don't think that evil at scale requires a bunch of leaders who believe they are evil. None of these guys really believed that they were evil. It just requires ordinary men and women in cultures that reward moral disengagement. People like shutting down morally, not concerned about that with their actions, or cultures that suppress dissent and gradually normalize the previously unthinkable. And like we said, education, sophistication does not protect against this. If the social environment trains people to stop questioning, to feel that questioning is disloyal, and to experience truth as whatever authority says truth is. And then by the time that the regime is committing its worst acts, like in the Third Reich, millions of Germans have been trained out of the habit of evaluating things morally. It's not like any of the defendants woke up one morning and decided to participate in genocide. The process was incremental. Early compromises, small dishonesties, small cruelties, small silences built towards larger ones. And each step makes the next easier. And Dr. Kelly shows how this individual moral erosion works. It's not rocket science. A person who tells small lies becomes capable of larger ones. A person who learns to look away from small injustices develops the capacity to look away from enormous ones. And then the Third Reich just exploited this human tendency and escalated demands on participants slowly enough that each step felt like a small extension of what had already been done. Maybe it's even a little lie at work, and then you do a little bit more, and maybe in a few years you're just disturbed by like the big things that you now accept, and so that's why you have to not allow little slides.
Exactly. I mean, that's been the whole argument with like slippery slopes or gateway drugs the whole time, is that you have to draw lines in the sand with your life. Um, I don't know if a random dude or random woman off the street says, "Hey, you want to sleep with me today?" You should already know. No, heck no. I'm a soldier for Christ. I'm a follower of God. Like, that's not going to happen. And what ended up happening with these guys is Hitler trained day and night to be a persuasive speaker, and he gave them persuasive reasoning that were attractive to our carnal minds, whatever it might have been, oh, these people are stealing from you. These people are behind all of your problems in life. Or they're really only like a couple of them on your street. And if we get rid of them, your country will be so much stronger. And so you should be okay with this thing that usually is wrong. I agree with you. It's usually wrong, but it's okay here. And you should already have that line drawn in the sand that when the night of broken glass happens and you're told to go and ransack every Jewish business, you should be able to know that's not right.
Yeah, you can't allow the small little slides, and we should make sure we don't have out groups in society. Like there shouldn't be a scapegoat that we get comfortable with. And that's one of the things that the left is, kind of doing. They make, white people are the evil perpetrators that are stagnating, blacks from being able to succeed. And so when they do that over and over, like, the minorities can feel like it's a good thing to get back at us eventually, and maybe even do horrible things to us as a group, or to conservatives, send conservatives to social re-education camps because of COVID, or we already have zygotes and embryos labeled as clumps of cells. They're an outgroup. It's okay to do violence to them. We just, if it's human, it needs to be treated the same way, and there's no exceptions.
I mean, that's what they did with Charlie. I mean, if you like the person, then they're your brother and sister, and you need to go by their pronoun and show them the highest, utmost respect, which I agree. You should show people respect, care for them, like Jesus said, care for them like you would yourself. But the moment you have someone like Charlie who doesn't agree with you, Nazi, it's okay to shoot him. Or Trump today, there was a whole bunch of rumors online today that he's been hospitalized. And it's not like Trump's my favorite person in the world, but there were millions of accounts just so upset that it wasn't true. It was fake. He wasn't actually hospitalized. And it's like there's an out group right there. You don't just say one group isn't human anymore. You don't make up euphemisms for how something isn't a baby because it's not out of the womb. It's not 6 months old just yet. And I mean, I know Chris and I would die on the hill that every human being is worthy of life.
That's right. And I guess we're just talking about a moral that is a basic one that the Allies held the Nazis to in the Nuremberg trials, is that every human being is worthy of respect and love, and you can't break that rule. So I read Dr. Kelly's book, the psychiatrist who interviewed all of these Nazi leaders. And so we've kind of summarized some of his findings. And so he actually gives a couple like prescriptions. What are some things that individuals can do, that a nation could do, to not end up like the Third Reich and the morally degraded Nazi leaders. And so there's just a few that I'll rifle off real quickly here and get your thoughts on them, Ammon. So the first one he says is, for an individual it's important that we cultivate a habit of moral examination. We shouldn't merely like hold values, like decide these are my morals. We need to regularly interrogate whether our actions are actually aligning with the morals that we say that we have. Conscience is not a possession, it is a practice. I like that. Next, he says, resist the comfort of deference. When a system or a leader asks you to stop asking questions and simply trust, recognize that as a danger sign rather than a virtue signal. I've had to worry about that, in the workplace myself. When a leader's like, it's okay to lie a little bit on this thing. Like it's just common practice. Everybody does it, and because it's coming from authority, it could be easy to do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's intimidating, and also just like it normalizes it. Like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we do then. We don't have firm morals when it comes to honesty, but instead our reaction should be, wait a second, maybe I do push back on that. And that carries into the third one, is be aware of escalating complicity. When you catch yourself making a small moral compromise, treat it as a warning, not a minor thing. The architecture of atrocity is built of small stones. Not a bad quote.
Not at
And
all. I actually have something on that.
yeah.
My wife, she loves these reality TV shows, and recently she's getting into this one called "I Dated a Psycho," and it's just this like sob story collection of these people who are very stupid. I mean, and I don't know, maybe it's uh, backseat driving, Monday morning quarterbacking, but you watch these people and they explain, oh, I fell in love with this person, but then they like hit me over the head with a beer bottle. And I thought that was kind of weird, but
Yeah.
like I stayed with them. And then they ended up like stabbing me 13 times. True story, actual case. You can look it up. I think it's season 1. But
I wouldn't
I
be
was like,
surprised by the stabbing after the beer bottle.
right? I'm like, where's this girl's brain? She's like, I never thought he was capable. I thought it was a one-off thing, so I gave him a second chance. And it's like, that's like right there with what you're saying, that you shouldn't treat it as a small thing. This is a huge warning. Like, you got to be aware of the escalation. It's like, okay, so they did this. What are they capable of? Versus like if you have a partner who like maybe makes a backhanded comment to you, you're like, oh, so they're capable of that. That's their limit. If their limit is hit me in the head with a beer bottle, it's like, I mean, murder is really only the next thing. And I think that's a really good point. I like that. Architecture of atrocity is built of small stones.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So last one is maintain the capacity for dissent. People who cannot say no to authority, not just like in big, like grand moments, like, no, I will not do this thing, but like in ordinary professional and social moments, like be able to say no. And maybe think about that right now. Are you able to say no if at work they do ask you to lie a little bit, or at school that, somebody's trying to get you to cheat, like, are you practiced with saying something? If not, maybe you should try. Maybe on your own, try to practice saying what you would say, or find someone you trust and do a role play with them. Like, you should feel like you can push back enough to keep your own morals and not let society or other people take them from you.
Amen.
Okay, so a takeaway that I had after reviewing all of this is the end game of moral relativism really leads to you or the American lawyer in the Nuremberg trials not even being able to explain why the Holocaust is bad, right? Because if you have no real morals, no basis for your morals, then the Holocaust, is just a distasteful thing. Like, you can't even say why it's bad. And so God is very important, and universal law is very important as the opposite of moral relativism, because when you get into situations like the Third Reich, or future atrocities in our country or in others, you need an ultimate authority that doesn't allow you to bend the rules in emergency or extreme situations. Like, it's in those emergency situations that we need to be most committed to our morals, and that is when we're tempted to break them because it's inconvenient. You need rules that are cemented in stone, not ultimately malleable. Okay, so last couple thoughts. Ammon, tell me what you think on this one. So you know how Christ says that no man can serve two masters. I know that's referring to like God and mammon, but I think it can connect to this as well. We should think about who is really the master in our life. If you're a moral relativist, is the master you? Are you the ultimate decider in the end of what is right or wrong, what goes or what doesn't? Maybe you even are religious, but if you really think about it, like, who really is the ultimate authority when push comes to shove? When it's hard to stand by religious truth or morals. Like, is God the master in your life, or is it money, or is it you? Is it your wife? Like, who really has the final say when push comes to shove? And I'll I'll be honest, like I try very hard to be a righteous, obedient person. And I think still there are small occasions where I'm tempted to kind of pridefully, like probably subconsciously, um, just assert my will, like I want to look at my phone right now and I want to look at shorts on YouTube for 10 minutes, like I I don't really know if that's the best thing to be doing right now or if God would approve of that. And
Condemnable, Chris. YouTube Short. I mean, geez, Instagram Reels is where it's at.
I had to delete Instagram because that was taking up time as well. It's yeah,
No,
I've been driven to YouTube Shorts because it's the only social media app on my phone. Uh, but
I like
like,
that. Yeah. I think what I would say with that is it's absolutely true that you can't serve two masters, that there'll always be the one that you end up resenting, or there'll be the one that you follow when it's easy. And then there's the one that when push comes to shove, this is who I follow. Am I going to follow the money? Like, am I going to be the fish in the river that gets yanked? It's like, nope, money's over there. Or there's some people who are ruled by their addictions. I think that's one of the reasons God is so against things like pornography or drugs, is because when you're in your times of solace, you turn to those instead of Him. And that's why I think it says in the Bible that God is a jealous God, that He doesn't like when our wills are ruled over by other people. But I think in regards with like our shorts addiction, it seems like that's a mutual thing here. Um, it's God. I think He views weakness different from rebellion, and there are people who are openly in rebellion to God. That my way is superior to yours, which we know is a complete fallacy, and will always land you in a heap of trouble and an error. Um, but when you decide to give your will to God completely and trust Him in everything and lean not unto your own understandings, I think that's Proverbs 3:5. Um, you aren't going to be just blown away with the wind. I think you said there, not verbatim, but that are we the ultimate arbiters of our life, or do we let God? And I think when you trick yourself into thinking you're your own arbiter, you end up just going with the tide. You'll follow what everyone else does, because that's how humanity goes. I think we're predisposed to worship something, to give things our alone attention. We're kind of like that, where we focus on the things that we think are interesting, the things that make us happy for the moment, instead of investing. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with the marshmallow challenge, but being able to delay gratification. And when we do that, we're able to be the black sheep that avoids the herd and avoid mob mentality. And when you stick with God, I think even when you do falter sometimes, if you're able to say at the end of the day, I'm going to follow God, that's how you escape the rat race that is this life, that is the world. And I think Chris and I have the same priority chain here, but for everyone listening, clearly the chain of priorities that you should have set in this life, if you want to steer straight and follow the covenant path and go along the straight and narrow instead of the wide and curvy that the devil shows, where you get lost in unknown destinations. You should have your priorities as it follows: God, then you should have your family, specifically your spouse, second, then have your country, then have your work, and maybe hobbies that you're super dedicated to. And when you have that rule of five, I think Warren Buffett made that popular, but you'll always be shooting straight. And maybe you'll mess up, but you need to do regular evaluations. Like, that's how these Nazis, and I think a lot of Germans did see through this, but a lot of them didn't. And I sincerely hope that you're able to see through it. And I know that if you follow that chain of command there, that you got God, your family, then country, then your work, and whatever else that you like to do, you'll be steered straight, and you can learn from the lessons of the history that Christopher went over today with the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I would end it on a similar note. I think each of us should be evaluating ourselves right now. Really think right now, who actually is the master in my life? Do I have a framework that I follow? Obviously, Eamon and I believe that Jesus Christ, his teachings, the scriptures should be the moral framework that you follow. You just live by every word that proceeds forth from the mouth of God. Like that is our moral structure. And it's written right there. It never changes. So we're just always accountable to it. And so, think about where you are right now. Are you the master in your life? Is God? Is it somebody else? Is it money? And then evaluate on an ongoing basis. Keep being aware of where you're sliding. And I think a good way to test where you're truly at. I was thinking about this with God versus mammon. Like, how is it that we can only serve God or mammon? Like, we can't do both, because I feel like good people are trying to earn money and provide for their families, and somehow you should be able to do that and follow God. And this is from AI, but it was actually a good framework, I thought. Um, you can tell whether you're serving God or money, because when push comes to shove and you have a choice that would allow you to make more money, let's say, maybe more money on a sale or a deal, but it would require you to break your morals a little bit, be a little bit dishonest, or treat another person poorly, or whatever it is. Do you give up the money, or do you give up your morals? And or do you, always follow what your wife tells you to do, or do you try to put God first and love and serve your wife? Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's the framework I would recommend, and God should always be first. Thank you for joining us for our Nuremberg trials discussions. We hope that you can see some good things for yourself and for improving society.